So now we're going to look at the place value part. And the very first part of the place value assessment has to do with place value, has to do with skip counting. And skip counting is the ability to count by hundreds, tens, and ones while counting and transitioning to another place value and then another place value after that. So level A, if you take a look, level A is an achieved level. So we know that like with addition subtraction and with part whole relationship, level A was more or less looking at the lowest level of thinking or strategy. Level A is actually an achieved task for place value. So if you take a look right here for this particular one, if they're able to do level A, that's actually a measurable skill that we wanted them to do. We want to say a task. Could they count by tens and ones with a representation, yes or no? So if they could do that, yes, that would mean that they were able to do it. So we're going to take a look at what is the difference between level X and level A. So if a student is able to do this level A, that means that they're able to do it. Now say a student is not able to count by ones and tens with a representation. You would go ahead and give them an X right there. Or again, if you don't want to put it inside the box, you want to put it outside the box so you don't mistake that you're giving them credit for getting it right, you can go ahead and do that as well. And so that's important to remember that level A is actually an achievement of a particular skill. Okay, so don't get it confused because sometimes level A is a default for certain levels. Sometimes it's an achieved skill. So for this particular one, it is definitely an achieved skill. So if you take a look here, if they get it wrong, you would go ahead and you could go ahead and just fill in this X right there. And if they are able to do it, you can go ahead and you can give them credit for that because that means that they were able to count by hundreds, tens, and ones, and you would go ahead and draw that dot in right there. Now remember, so now looking at the instructional, now remember, even though this is all of the different place value, all the different place value things you can do for the level activities guide, we're still focusing just on the split counting part right here. So remember, with split counting, the way it works too is level A was an achieved level, okay? So if a student ends up being, this level X, you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna work on instructional stuff, level A. Now remember, level A is what? It means can they count things with the representation. So the reason why all these are clumped together is because it follows the CRA, which is the concrete representational abstract. And since this place value part right here has to do with is counting, counting visual things, and then can they abstractly hold the count without seeing these visuals? So that's why the instruction, and when you go through the materials here, you'll see the way it's set up. And so it may seem a little confusing right now, but when you actually get into materials, you'll be like, oh, it makes sense because we're going to show them, we're going to give them, some manipulatives to use, then we're going to take them away and have them do it orally. So that's how it's set up to do. So remember, if they're level X, you're going to go ahead and you're looking at instruction for level A. If they're level A, you're going to go ahead and be working on level B. And if they're level B, you'll work on level C, and level C, you'll work on D. And the way the place value book is set up, it's I don't know if you can see this exactly, but it says, for split counting level A, level B, level C, level D. So you would just click on the next level from where they tested again. So if they're X, you're working on level A. If they're A, you're working on level B. And again, there's another document too that shows you when you look at the framework level, it'll tell you exactly which one of these materials to go ahead and that you can use. So this next part of place value, which has to do with adding from a base 10 and using place value concepts, or adding from a base 10. Now this is a little bit different than the last part because remember with split counting, level A was like an achieved task. Could they count ones and tens with a representation, yes or no? Now if you take a look at this one, the way the assessment's set up, you have level B, level C, level D, level B, level C, level D. Level A can't even be actually like tested. Like if they just show up and say nothing, they would sort of automatically default to a level A. So let's take a look at the framework here though. We have this framework which has this X and A. So a question is, what is the difference between level X and level A? So for this part right here, if we take a look at adding base 10, if a student says, okay, if you say, what is 10 more than 62, and they go, 63, 64, 65, 66, and they count by ones and they get it right, you could go ahead and say, okay, they got the answer right, but they used, a really low level strategy. Because remember, we're not seeing can they count on at this point. We're not seeing can they, can they count on 10? We're seeing can they apply a place value concept with addition? That's really what we're looking for them to do. So if they get it right, you can go ahead and you can say they would be a level A, and then you'd go ahead and fill in this dot right here. Say they count by ones and they get it wrong, or they're just not able to get the answer correct, then you can go ahead and put an X in the box, which means that obviously they didn't get that. Or you can put an X outside the box if you're not comfortable with that. Now, again, the beauty of this, or the great thing is, whether they are level X or level A, instructionally, they will, both of these levels, since they're at the same starting point, will work on level B, right? And if a student tests at a level B, that means that they can do 10 more, 10 less from 10, then level C mean they're working on 20, right? And then if they're able to do level C, they do level D, which is doing 100 more. Okay, so that's how this works. So if they're level X or level A, you'll automatically go to B. And again, there's the document that shows you the instructional, the levels and materials map, and it'll show you exactly where their framework plotting is, what to do and what to work on it with. So remember, for this part of the particular assessment right here, level A is a default. It's not necessarily an achieved level. If they get it right by counting by ones or not able to do it instructionally, they're still going to end up in the same place. And the last part of this just has to do with the instructional parts, or where you're going to look. So remember, when you're looking at this framework right here, and again, everything seems to be really cluttered, and why is level A, B, C, and D all together? Because all of these, there's so much development that needs to go in place. And if you take a look with, especially with adding base 10, a lot of this has to do with things that you did when you're teaching about counting by tens with counting. So this is almost a replication of the strategies that you did. So if students can count by tens, this should be a really easy thing for them to do. If not, you may want to consider just going back and working on that counting by tens, because these are the exact same things you'll do to teach your kids to count by tens. So when you go through the instructional materials, there's just one part where it says place value adding base 10 or adding from base 10. You click on that and it goes through a series of representations where it will have, a concrete and then an abstract, and that's how you're teaching them to do that, because really this part is a measure of sort of their understanding of place value and mental math. Okay, and again, in the books, you just go ahead and you would look at the levels that